With victory forecast in two crucial Midwest states. The Democratic Party challenger, Joe Biden, says he's confident he's on course to win the White House. He's also gaining ground on President Trump in Georgia and Pennsylvania. But Joe Biden's lead in Arizona shrunk overnight. The Trump campaign is taking legal action in several states, calling for counts to be stopped. The results so far are extremely close. Here are the latest Electoral College figures. Joe Biden is on 243 votes and Donald Trump on 214. Remember, a candidate needs 270 Electoral College votes to secure the presidency. Joe Biden is inching closer to victory after claiming Michigan overnight. No result has yet emerged in Pennsylvania, a big prize with its 20 Electoral College votes. This is the popular votes so far. Joe Biden at 50%, with Donald Trump at 47%. Joe Biden has received over 70 million votes, more than any other presidential candidate ever. Though, of course, it's only the Electoral College vote that clinches the White House. And despite the Democrats' high hopes at the moment, it looks like the Republicans are on track to keep hold of the Senate. The Democrats are projected to retain their majority in the lower chamber, the House of Representatives, but with key losses. Ben Wright now reports.
There are still millions of votes to count, and this presidential race is not decided.
Looking to see.
In Georgia, Donald Trump kept the narrowest of leads over Joe Biden as ballots were tallied late into the night. It was a scene repeated in the handful of states that will now decide this election. At the moment, it's Joe Biden sounding confident. He currently has more Electoral College votes than his rival and chalked up vital wins in the Midwest. Michigan, a Democratic gain, and Wisconsin looks to have gone the same way.
Here, the people rule. Power can't be taken or asserted. It flows from the people. And it's their will that determines who will be the President of the United States, and their will alone.
In Nevada, the two candidates are neck and neck, and the state will release more results on Thursday. And in Arizona, once a Republican stronghold, Joe Biden stayed slightly ahead while election officials counted the remaining postal ballots. After President Trump prematurely declared victory and erroneously claimed in a tweet to have won states he hadn't, Republicans filed a string of lawsuits and complaints.
We're going to win Pennsylvania, but they're trying to cheat us out of it because they know it's their only path to victory. They know it's the only path to victory. And so we came here today, we met with all our lawyers. We are going to file suit in Pennsylvania.
Donald Trump wrapped up his battleground tour on Monday in Wisconsin, but it wasn't enough to hold the state. His response today was to call for a recount. After an attempt by the Trump campaign to stop the count in Michigan, the state's chief election officer called the lawsuit meritless.
We're focused on getting this right in a way that can withstand any court challenges. I'll also mention, and we've seen this not just in Michigan, but in other states, a lot of times court challenges or allegations are thrown around to further political agendas as opposed to actual legal claims.
We could still be waiting a while to discover who the next president will be, as an unprecedented volume of postal votes are counted. But it's the current occupant of the White House who is trying to catch up. Ben Wright, BBC News, Washington.
And I'm joined now by our correspondent, Will Grant. So, Will, it's very close. The Biden campaign feeling a bit more confident. But President Trump did gain some ground overnight, didn't he, in Arizona? Tell us about the significance potentially of that.
Yeah, it's an important gain, isn't it? I mean, every single vote counts at this stage. And, you know, these are the nervy moments after a long and arduous campaign. In Arizona, Vice President Biden's lead is narrowing. Of course, there's an important part of that state is Maricopa County, and that covers an important urban area. Postal votes, so much part of the Trump ire in recent weeks, may actually be benefiting him there too. So it sort of cuts both ways. Look, I mean, at this stage, Joe Biden feels the more confident of the two men. But as you heard in Ben's report, as you've been saying, as you've laid out the numbers at the top here, it's just not clear yet. And I think that has a lot of Americans, a lot of people watching on around the world on edge.
And Will, just tell us about Pennsylvania. It's where the campaign spent their final days. 20 crucial electoral college votes there. But How long until we know the result there, and why is it so slow?
Well, that's so slow basically because their ruling stated that the postal votes, and there were millions of them, wouldn't be counted until the polls closed. So unlike Florida, for example, which got a jump on the counting, so that by the time the polls closed, they'd already counted all the postal votes, Pennsylvania was quite the other way. So that could last really 3 full days. That would take us into tomorrow, in fact. So, you know, one has to kind of take a breath, be calm, and wait to see what happens in Pennsylvania, which is easy to an extent as observers, obviously difficult for the campaign and those who have got so much invested in this. Of course, it also allows a large margin for those lawsuits, and we've certainly seen both sides lawyered up. We've seen a string of challenges already lodged by the Trump administration and the Trump campaign, I should say. And I do think that no matter what sort of happens, this will end up to an extent being decided within the courts.
And let's just talk a little bit about those many legal challenges from the Trump campaign, and they're filing in pretty much every key battleground state. What are they asking for?
Well, different things in different places. For example, they want the count to be stopped in some places so that they can gain access. That was an argument that took place in Michigan, for example. There's challenges been lodged in Wisconsin where they want a recount. You know, this is a very litigious businessman in Donald Trump, long before he became president. And it doesn't surprise most observers to see that he's going to be quite a litigious president at this stage too. The campaign has been lawyered up for a long time. The legal teams are primed. But I think, again, that also cuts both ways. Joe Biden's team is going to have its legal defense ready. By and large, this is about access and about questioning the legality of postal votes being counted after the cut-off date of the 3rd of November. Of course, in those places where they've lodged those, it is perfectly legal. Everything that seems to be questioned is within the rules of the game, within the electoral system.
Will Grant, thanks so much. Well, let's take a closer look at those legal challenges that Will was talking about there, mounted by the president's team. Professor Lawrence Douglas is an expert in US election law. He joins me now from the state of Massachusetts. Thanks so much for being with us. So I'm just looking at the Trump campaign's statement about what they're doing in Pennsylvania. They're suing to stop Democrat election officials from hiding the ballot counting. Do you think that's going to go anywhere?
No, I actually don't think it's going to go anywhere. You know, and one thing we need to bear in mind is, you know, it's always possible to launch legal challenges. It's another thing to prevail in those legal challenges. And I don't really see any of the challenges that the Trump team right now is bringing forward as likely to prevail.
Now, the president told us in the early hours of Wednesday morning that he was going to go to the Supreme Court to stop the voting, in his words. Has he done that?
Well, he can't go directly to the Supreme Court. What he can do is he can kind of bring various suits through, let's say, state courts. And given the time pressures in resolving these things in an expeditious fashion, it's certainly possible that these things could then be fast-tracked up to the Supreme Court. But the notion that he can go directly to the Supreme Court and, for example, demand a nationwide stop of the count of mail-in ballots, which is what I think he suggested yesterday morning. No, he does not have the authority to do that. He can't do that.
But also, is the Trump campaign going against its interests a bit here? Because in Arizona, actually, as the counting goes on, in fact, their lead is narrowing. Joe Biden is losing some votes and the Trump campaign is gaining ground. So doesn't the Trump campaign really, in the end, want all the votes to be counted too?
Well, I think, again, I hate to put it this way, but I don't think if you charge their campaign with hypocrisy, it's necessarily going to be a charge that's going to stick with them. But I think it is right to point out that in a certain way, they are talking out of their mouth in two different directions. I mean, in the sense that they want the counting to continue in Nevada and Arizona, where it could benefit them, and they basically want the counting to stop in any other state in which they think it is to their disadvantage to let it continue. So it's not exactly what we could say is a consistent position. It's a position that is really kind of marked by political expediency rather than any kind of principled response to the count of mail-in ballots.
And has the president also undermined his own position a bit legally by talking so much in advance about how mail-in ballots are fraudulent, about how he's going to go to the Supreme Court, about how he's counting on the court to rule in his favour? Given that judicial independence is a core tenet of the legal system, that doesn't help him with judges, does it?
No, and I think it is fair to say that if a matter were to come to the Supreme Court, and if that matter were somehow to have some kind of potential material bearing on the outcome of an election in a state, I really do think that Justice John Roberts would bend over backwards to make sure that the court wasn't intervening in a manner that seemed to be, at least from a political perspective, breaking for Donald Trump. Roberts he's a true institutionalist. He cares greatly about the integrity of the court, and I think that would really be a kind of a self-destructive act for the court that would widely be attacked throughout the country should the court intervene in such a manner.
Lawrence Douglas, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, Lucy, it's really on a knife edge here this morning. It's 7:13 on the East Coast. Americans are waking up and they still don't know who the president is.
Laura, the pollsters, that's one story, isn't it? Clearly got it wrong again. President Trump getting much more support than they had predicted. But I think people around the world are asking where that support for President Trump comes from, because global perceptions of him are very poor. There are lots of negatives. What are the positives that people aren't seeing?
Well, look, you have to say that President Trump has almost 70 million votes. The country's divided almost 50-50. And it's a huge achievement, even if he loses the presidency, because his coattails were so strong across rural America, making inroads with minorities, getting a big chunk of the Hispanic vote, doing better with black men, albeit not by much, to the extent that Democrats really are in trouble in the House of Representatives. They're going to have a very small majority there. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to win the Senate as they thought. So even if Joe Biden becomes president, Donald Trump's coattails are going to make it hard for a President Biden. He's going to have to negotiate, in other words, to get things done. So the president, it's an extraordinary that the fundamental political realignment in America, where you have rural areas, ex-urban areas, swinging for the president, doubling down on his support there. The Trump campaign said all along there were people out there that didn't vote in 2016 that liked the president. People the pollsters said didn't exist. Well, guess what? They do, and the president has them. And also his emphasis on jobs, on reopening the economy, really appealing to lower-income minorities, Hispanics, black men, people who have suffered so much through this pandemic, and they liked his no-nonsense appeal.
Laura, thanks for that. We'll see you shortly. All eyes on the crucial battleground states that are yet to declare a result, as Laura was saying. But let's actually take you through how those states are doing. In Georgia, the president's lead over Joe Biden continues to narrow, with 95% of the vote counted. Donald Trump holds 49.6% of the vote. Joe Biden has 49.1%, so he isn't far behind. Mr. Biden is ahead in Arizona. That's an important race, as Laura was saying, 50.5% with 86% of the vote counted. The race there extremely tight, but Donald Trump making gains. Again, a very close race in Pennsylvania. At the moment, President Trump has a slight majority there, 50.7%. Joe Biden in the lead in Nevada. He's gotten 49.3% of the vote there so far. And we are expecting a result from Wisconsin soon. 99% of the vote has been counted there, with Democratic candidate Joe Biden looking on track to win the state. Most US media outlets have already declared it for the Democrats. The BBC still considers these too early to project, though.